So for our ENG6 project, we decided to recreate the 21 card game, but we also modified it to simplify the game. To simulate the standard deck of cards, I created two 52-element arrays, one called deck images and one called deck values. Elements of deck images stores the card PNG images as type string, and the deck values stores the card values that are corresponding to the images as a type double. These arrays are related by index. As for the card visuals, we decided to use a randy function to randomly select from a length of deck images, which is the number of cards we have in our deck. So since that is our input, we indexed it using the actual array of deck images, and we're able to simulate a random card. The visible property for all the cards is off by default, so whenever a new round or hit buttons are clicked, then the visible property is turned on. So for the game layout, the player chooses a number of players, which is a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4, using 3 buttons that are on the initial game screen. So the callback to each button assigns the corresponding value to the non-player variable, which also serves as the expression for a switch statement. So for the switch case statement, each case has the number of players that the player chooses, and underneath each case is the expressions or the statements to determine the layout for the game.
In regards to the hit buttons, each hit button is located underneath each card. If a player wants to switch out a card, they must press the red circle underneath that card position. In terms of the third card, if there is not a card already above the third button, it adds a third card to the player's hands. In the code for each hit button, A1 will refer to player 1's first card, A2 to their second card, and then same goes for player 2, 3, and 4. Player 2 will have the letter B, player 3 is C, and player 4 is D. And the functions of the new round button are nearly the same in the hit, however, it's not repeated as in the new round button, but instead happens to each singular card. Additionally, instead of having the variable x that's being put into the randi function, the randi directly takes the length of the current deck images, seen here, because each hit button removes the card. Therefore, the deck will get shorter as each hit button is pressed.
So for card value tracking, a cell array was used to keep track of the values of the cards of each player. The player number button is created a 4x n cell array, where n is equal to the number of players. The first row of the cell array contains string values, where each column corresponds to a player. For example, column 1, row 1 index has a value string player 1, and column 2, row 1 index has a value string player 2. The new round button indexes 2 random card values from a 52x1 cell array, which contains all the values one would find in a deck of cards. These 2 index values would then be placed into the existing cell array from the player number buttons. For example, column 1, row 2, and 3 positions would be indices where the random card values would be placed for player 1, and similar for player 2, just with different indices. The hit button for each one of the player's 3 cards would again index a random card value from the updated cell array and place the card in the corresponding index for the existing card value tracking cell array. For example, card 1 for player 1's hit button would have an index position of 1 by 2. Card 2 for player 1's hit button would have an index position of 1 by 3, and so on. Each random card value generated from the deck array would be taken out of the deck array, thus decreasing its length each time. So for scoring, in the end round button, each column of the cell array that tracks the player's card values is indexed and converted into a 1 by 3 numeric array. Each 1 by 3 array corresponds to a player with the variables being named player 1, player 2, etc. The sum function would then be used to sum the 3 values in each 1 by 3 array, and again assign 2 variables corresponding to players. These variables would then be used to determine the winner of the round, given that the winning player's variable is less than 21 but greater than any of the other players.
So to determine the winner, the scores are added to an array called valid scores. Since valid scores are less than 21, each player's score sum is run through an if statement that tests if the score is greater than 21. And if it is, the score becomes 0. The winning player has a score that is the maximum in the array valid scores, so we use the max function. The switch case is also used to ensure that there are no undefined functions.
In regards to the audio and animations, for the animations, we made a trophy image blink on and off above the label and hit buttons of the player who won that round. However, if there is no winner, a no winner label blinks on and off instead. And the length of this animation is approximately 5 seconds. For the audio, we use 2 different audios. One is the sound of a card being dealt, and it plays when the new round button is clicked or when the hit button is clicked, since it goes along with the image of a card appearing. Additionally, we also had the cheering sound that goes along with the animation of the blinking trophy or the no winner label.
Okay, this is our demo for our card game. As you can see, since we are player 1, we're going to go ahead and click the box on the lower left as player 1. And if we go to the top left, we can click the how to play button.
Try to get as close to 21 as possible without going over. Each player is dealt a hand of 2 cards at the beginning of each round, but can hold up to 3. Player 1 must click new round to start a new round first, and then the other players can hit their new round button after waiting. Each player only gets 1 turn starting from player 1 and going through to 4. Besides player 1, each player must hit the update cards button before they start using their hit buttons. If a player wants to switch out cards with the hit buttons, they must only hit a hit button once and must go from left to right with their hit buttons. And you can add a third card to your hand using the third hit button. Do not hit a button more than once and do not go out of order with your hit buttons. For example, don't hit button 3, then button 2. You must do button 2, then button 3. Once the player is satisfied with all of their cards, they must click the checkbox next to their player label. And you can check if it's your turn using the check turn button. After all players have clicked their checkbox, player 1 should click the end round button, followed by the other players shortly after, which will also determine which player has the highest sum that is less than 21 and wins.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that, and then we're going to click the 2 players button since we're going to be playing with 2 players. As you can see, we're now at the main game screen. There's 2 spots corresponding to the 2 players and 3 buttons for each player corresponding to 3 cards. At top right, there's a new round button, an end round button, an update cards button, a check turn. We're going to go ahead and click the new round button since we're player 1. And this should deal 2 cards initially to each player. Okay, after waiting some time, player 2 is going to go ahead and click their new round button. This should update their cards. Now player 1 is going to go ahead and change their first card, wait a little bit, and then they're going to go ahead and click the third button so that they can add a third card to their hand. Okay, and now once player 1 is satisfied with the selection, they're going to go ahead and click the checkbox next to their corresponding game number. Okay, this will indicate that it is player 2's turn, and it will enable player 2 to be able to check their turn, and as you can see, it's displayed it's their turn. Now they're going to go ahead and click the update cards button, which allows player 1's cards to be updated on their end. You can see the cards have been updated, and now player 2 is going to go ahead and click their second card button to change it. After that, they're going to go ahead and click the third button so that they can add a third card to their hand. Now that player 2 is satisfied, they're going to check their check box next to their player number, and this will allow player 1 to find out if player 2 is done or not. So player 1 is going to go ahead and click their check turn button. As you can see, it displays that it's their turn. So now player 1 is going to go ahead and end the round by clicking the end round button. This will update player 2's card selection on player 1 end and also determine the winner by displaying a trophy. As you can see, player 1 has won. Now player 2 is going to go ahead and click the end round button, and it is going to determine who has won. As you can see, player 1 has won on player 2's end as well. Better luck next time, player 2.